I've had these conversations with some of my friends because they have this idea that the conservative church is the problem because we haven't progressed. We don't know the issues. And I'm like, well, what happens when an alien shows up? That means all your fear of bringing the supernatural into the conversation is out the window. People will not believe in Christianity, your Christianity at that point, right?
One that's even more likely. What happens when masses of people around the world are convinced that aliens do exist, whether you actually get one or not? You can move those herds without even producing one.
Well, Ancient Aliens is already doing it.
Right. The problem becomes the same thing. And again, I'm not saying this makes any sense, but somehow lots of evangelicals have convinced themselves that it's okay to demythologize the Bible for category B. But we have to have category A because then even calling ourselves a Christian would make no sense at all. Well, the question is still on the table. On what basis do I have these categories and pick one and reject the other? It really just doesn't make any sense. And what it really comes down to in a lot of conversations is, well, I think the stuff in this category is just more respectable. I mean, I can believe that and people won't think I'm crazy. Again, the question really isn't answered. The question isn't what do people think? The question is to you. Okay, you're the one that says you're the Bible believer. And if your only answer is, I feel more comfortable with column A than I do column B, I can have better conversations in column A than I can with column B, that's really not theology. That's looking inward. It's not coherent.
Do you feel like that's by design? Like if everyone, they're hardcore into evolution, they don't think anything supernatural, we just kind of all evolved, then, there is this mass deception that could sweep in and deceive millions because they're primed?
I think people can get entrapped for all sorts of reasons. There are plenty of Christians out there who accept both evolution and a supernatural world. There are plenty of Christians out there who don't accept evolution and don't accept a supernatural world. There's no neat way to sort of create the taxonomy and then be able to pick, well, okay, this one's going to get attacked this way and go that direction and all that. So I think the threat is common. The source of the threat, again, I think is intelligent evil. That's common. The strategy is what I think is different. In other words, the path that people can be led to or are on and don't see the implications of it. I think there's significant variety there. And I think part of the cure is to have conversations like this one, write books and do podcasts, at least get someone to consider the implications of what they believe and what they're asking you to believe. And I think we can do that in non-confrontational ways. It's been a while since I don't know, maybe 5-6 years since I've spoken at a UFO conference. But back in the old days, I did Roswell, I don't know, for 3 or 4 years in a row. And there was always this one woman in the crowd. Like, I don't know, do you always take vacation at the same time of the year and go to the same place? The Roswell, conference. But we would refer to her as the Gnostic chick. And she was a Gnostic and she was committed, but she was always there and she wasn't bombastic or anything like that. I mean, this is a thoughtful person and she always had good questions. And what I would ultimately end up telling her, depending on what the question was, is look, and you're doing this in front of everybody. Here's what I need to come over to your side. I need you to demonstrate this and this and this and this. So that was a way of me not just saying, well, you're just some crazy chick that shows up every year, because that would be disrespectful and really untrue, in her case. But it sort of gave her homework. So it didn't validate her position, but it let her know that I was taking the conversations seriously. And I might be thinking, you really don't have a prayer of ever producing these things, but I'm not going to just dismiss you because of what you believe or what you think. And I was being honest. If you can do this, this, and this, and this, well, then you win. Then you've got the compelling.
Love this is where it's going, though, Mike. If you're speaking to these UFO conferences, aside from, engaging with this Gnostic woman, what platform are you presenting when you're talking about UFOs in that space?
Well, I would usually get invited to a UFO conference for one of two reasons, or maybe both. One was people liked to hear me talk about, could conservative, Bible-believing Judeo-Christianity, could it survive or sustain a genuine extraterrestrial reality? Okay, so that was like lecture one. And then I'd invariably get looped into the ancient aliens thing. So that was usually took the form of a critique of Zechariah Sitchin, or let's talk about Ezekiel 1, or something like that. So I would get invited for one of those two things. And I really liked the first talk because it's important, but it gets me into a better understanding. Because I think the dominant evangelical position about what the image of God is weak, and it is very ethically tenuous, and I'm even willing to call it dangerous. So it would get me into the image of God issue. And it was also an opportunity to go through the gospel, because ultimately you get to the question of, okay, if there are aliens, does Jesus have to go in all these worlds and die? So you have to talk about what the atonement is, how it's accomplished. So that invariably gets you, through into a gospel presentation and talking about the theological subjects that attach themselves to that. So that was always good. It's a surreal experience to be going through the plan of salvation in front of 400 or 500 people at a UFO conference. But in the context of aliens. But I've said this, and it's offensive to a lot of Christians, but it's true. So, okay, deal with it. The average person at a UFO conference is more primed to have a good theological discussion with than the average person in church. Those people are ready for the conversation. They're hungry, and they're already thinking about the major big picture questions. Who are we? What or who is God? Why are we here? How did we get here? These are all the big overarching theological questions, and they're down that road. So you can have really good conversations, and people were interested in churchy talk or Bible talk as it relates to UFO stuff, because mentally most of the people in the audience have already wondered about these questions. The difficult point for a lot of people on both sides, whether they're Christians or not, is to realize that questions aren't answers. Bad answers don't necessarily reveal the right answer. Ancient aliens, I understand why it's popular, because just think about the intelligence. I'm talking about whoever came up with the idea. I don't think they had the foresight that we're going to be in 16 seasons now. But as far as like the saleability of it, what you have is you have a lot of people who reject the narrative of the Bible, Judeo-Christianity. They reject the whole explanation of origins and who we are and why we're here and all that stuff. But at the same time, you also have people who reject a Darwinistic approach. It's unsatisfying for any number of reasons. So there's this middle realm. And what Ancient Aliens does is it allows people to retain mystery to life. It allows them to seek and believe in something transcendent. It allows them to answer all the questions they have without appeal, to these other two poles. It's this middle road that addresses all the important questions, which is why people find it so attractive. Plus, here's the bonus. It comes with zero spiritual accountability.
It just sounds like the New Age movement almost. There isn't any accountability. It's kind of whatever you want to make it.
It gives you a place to disagree with the other two poles and have the discussion that you want to have.